Welcome back to Our Nation This Week. I'm Faytene with the News Forum, and I once again have the honor, the privilege of having the Honorable Stockwell Day with me, former leader of the opposition, also cabinet minister holding several portfolios, including public safety, emergency preparedness, and the list goes on. Thank you for being with me today, Stockwell.
Great to be with you, Faytene.
Okay, COVID-19, let's keep her going. Just this morning, the lines opened up for the CERB program, stands for Canadian Emergency Response Benefit program, will give Canadians who qualify $500 a week for up to 16 weeks. They were saying this morning on the news that 1,000 applicants per minute were being processed. Stockwell, is this sustainable?
That's a huge number, Faytene, and it is not sustainable. I mean, people generally are supporting extreme measures that have to be taken right now. But I wish the elected people would be more clear with our population that this is absolutely not sustainable. It's untenable. At the end of 2019, our economy in Canada had already ground to a stop in terms of growth. And that's because of certain spending practices and taxation, et cetera. So what we have is a situation now. I mean, people say, how many more days can we sustain this? Well, actually, from the first day that these kind of programs started, which were necessary, but from the first day they started, that means the economy continues to grind down from that day until we eventually get out of this, and we will get out of it. But this is unsustainable. Eventually leads to runaway inflation. That leads to a loss of purchasing power. That leads to Venezuela-like situations. I'm not trying to frighten people, but I'm just going to say we've got to be realistic. This cannot continue. We have to look at realistic ways to get people working again and also to protect the vulnerable.
Okay. So how long do you see this going? How many weeks, how many months are we looking at this dynamic?
That's anybody's guess. I mean, some people think progress is being made. We know in the US, they're coming up with a number of solutions like testing kits that now give results in 5 minutes. That actually can be part of the solution. But this is trying to predict when this ends is difficult. As you know, China about a week ago, or as much as 2 weeks ago, was saying that they're ahead of the curve. People are going back to work. And now, just about the time these results were coming out that you were referring to, now we hear there's a second wave in China. And so we've got to be realistic and realize that whenever we get out of this one, which could be 2 or 3 months, maybe, the chances of a secondary wave are very possible. So you can't keep digging into the economic hole the way we have been. Yes, for now, for a little while, but some other things have to kick in because there's no guarantee that we're not going to get a secondary wave, or in fact, that we won't get another virus. We've had 2 like these in the last 10 years. It's highly likely there could be another one.
Okay, so we've got the CERB benefit program. We've got EI. Last statistics I saw, over 2.4 million Canadians had already registered for EI just in the last few weeks. How does Canada generate income right now to try to support these benefit packages?
That's the key question. And in fact, we have shut down effectively much of our economy. So we're not generating the type of income we need to be able to sustain these type of programs, which, as I said, on an emergency basis, this is necessary. But we can't. The answer to your question is we can't. We cannot, in this present state of mind and state of economic paralysis, we can't generate the economy, the economic revenue stream to support this. I was very alarmed the other day, Faytene, on a national TV network to see a so-called top economist. Now he's an advisor to labor unions and to the NDP party in Canada. I'm just not being partisan here. I'm just stating that. But he actually said, and the interviewer pushed him twice. She said to him twice, how do we sustain this? How are we going to pay for these programs? And he said, without even smiling, he said, the bank, in the Bank of Canada, and the government, all they have to do is create the money. Well, that's sending a frightening message to people out there who are going, yeah, I can just stay home and do my EI. So there's ways in which we can be planning to put people and get people back to work, to your question on generating the economy. But thinking even for a second that we just create money and there's no consequences of that, that's a very wrong frame of mind for people to be in.
Okay. So obviously we're digging ourselves into a debt hole or putting ourselves in a vulnerable situation for hyperinflation coming out of this. How do we jumpstart the economy on the other side of COVID-19? Is it the pipeline? Is there something else that you see?
It's a lot of things. One thing that you have to have in place, you have to have the reassurance that whatever happens, we do not crater the hospital system. This is the whole reason that countries have shut down their entire economies, because they're afraid of overwhelming the hospital system. That's why the temporary facilities that are being made to house people, that has to move and move quickly. I mean, it should have been announced by now. A plan to have permanent, standalone flu treatment centers in place across the country, like forever, and properly equipped and staffed by trained emergency specialists who would be called up in a time of crisis to care for those who are infected, to care for those who are being stricken. And that way you can keep the economy going. We know that the majority of the population is not being affected by this. So if you've got the means in place to care for those who are being affected, and now, as we know, even today, there are cities in North America, Detroit being one, that has available to them, it's a breakthrough technology, COVID tests that can have results in 5 minutes. So you can see that we've technologically hit the place now where people can go to work, a security guard at work, or they can test themselves at home before they go to work and see if they actually have the virus or not. If they have it, they stay home and they quarantine for 14 days. If they don't have it, they go to work. So you keep the vulnerable population sheltering in place, and you equip the training centers to care for the sick, and then you equip workers with the technology that we have right now. It's just been developed to quickly identify whether they carry the virus or not and whether they can go to work or not. These are some of the things that the government needs to be announcing that they're buying. They need to state that they're massively buying and investing in these testing kits and also the flu treatment centers.
Okay, so when you're talking about testing kits, you can see where this is potentially going, mandatory testing before you go to work. Is it possible that this could lead towards mandatory vaccinations? Just to throw another controversial topic in the mix here.
Well, you're picking all the hot topics. That could evolve. The problem with that is a vaccination, as we know from the flu vaccination, only pertains to one or to a very limited number of strains of a particular virus. So we may well indeed come up with a vaccine. They think it could be a year, incidentally, for COVID-19. But that may fade out and be replaced by another one, by something similar or something completely different. So the mechanism in place, we're still going to have to have vaccines would be fine, especially for those who want them. But we know that people who get the vaccine anyway, right now, over half of them wind up getting colds or the flu anyway, because you can't zero in on just one particular one and say that's going to eliminate it. So vaccines, yes, we should have a vaccine. But we also need the way, the means to equip people to get back to work. The majority of the population are not going to get sick from COVID-19. How we keep it from spreading and how we keep our hospitals protected, that's going to be the key to getting healthy people back to work.
Okay, I got to ask you another question here. I just can't shake it. The social cost. Okay, so obviously people are staying home from work. People need to be provided for. They need to be able to pay the rent. We know going into this, the average Canadian was only $200 away from insolvency. We understand that people need help right now, but we also know that people staying home off of work is creating other social issues, whether that's domestic violence, whether it's depression, suicide, addiction. How does a public servant, an elected official, decide what social cost is more important than the other? Where's the line here?
It's an awful decision to have to make. It's a balancing act, and elected people, first and foremost, I would encourage them, don't be stampeded by the media, because right now politicians all across North America, they get hit every time one area says they're going to do this. Then the local media leap on it and say, why haven't you done this yet? Why haven't you done that yet? So there's huge pressure. As far as possible, these decisions need to be medically based and scientifically based. For instance, in Vancouver, you're still allowed, quite rightly, to take a walk on the seawall and to go down to the beach as long as you're social distancing. But in California, the governor, who has done some good things, has an edict out. He's got police patrolling hundreds and hundreds of shoreline to make sure there's not one person on any beach anywhere in California or in the ocean, for instance, in a boat or swimming. Now, that's a case where they've gotten it out of hand. People are allowed to walk in California on streets as long as they social distance, but they can't, one person can't be on a 10-mile stretch of beach alone. So, they've got to get realistic. But in terms of that social cost you refer to, we know already it's huge. People are under huge pressure, the stress, being in your home, not being allowed to go out, the heartbreaking stress, and we're reading about it and seeing it every day, of a loved one dying in a hospital, and you can't your hand praying with them, whatever it is that gives them comfort. These things are excruciating. They cannot continue, and it's why we have to be realistically looking at how we get people out again and how we care for the vulnerable and the sick. But you're right, these people losing their livelihoods, their jobs, their small businesses. I hate to suggest it, but suicide becomes an option for some people, and the mental stress, all of that can be measured, and some might say are as awful, and maybe the final results of that are worse than the elderly people who are going through the grief of their losses right now.
Well, so many critical issues at play here. So let's land it with this question. What does the world look like? What does Canada look like at the end of all this in your assessment, Stockwell?
Well, I do think there'll be a turnaround. We will get out of this. I hope we put some of these measures in place that I've talked about so we can get working again. But I think some things may permanently change. Are people going to go back to mass events, for instance, stadiums? Are people going to go into movie theaters? Next time I see you, am I going to shake your hand or not? Probably I'll be saying, hi, good to see you. At work, just social distancing. I think there are going to be some significant changes in terms of social interaction. It still comes back to everybody, we need each other. We need to be encouraging each other, especially at a difficult time like this. In a strange way, I think, Faytene, we're going to be a more caring, a more sensitive population. We're really going to be wondering, how are you doing? You've been at home for a while. Someone doesn't show up at work. You make a call, maybe a little quicker. I think with some of the amazing human forms of outreach that are taking place right now, and the businesses, which are often criticized by the left at being only concerned about money and profits. Wow, some of the things that small and large business is doing to reach out to help people get through this. So whether it's business or whether it's in the neighborhoods, I think we're actually going to come through this a more compassionate population.
I sure hope you're right. Well, Mr. Day, thank you so much for your generosity with your time today. You've given us a ton to think about. The Honorable Stockwell Day, former leader of the opposition. Hope to have you back. Hope to see you guys all next time at the News Forum. This is Faytene, Our Nation This Week.